Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. I will be joined shortly by Chuck Ridgeway for a discussion on the topic of automation is everywhere. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it is my pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. My name is Chuck Ridgeway. I work for Horner Automation. We're an automation company based in Indianapolis, Indiana. And while we don't automate machines and equipment ourselves, we manufacture electronic components that our customers use to automate their machines. So we don't actually do the automation, our customers do it. They add their intellectual property and take our component, which acts as kind of the brains of the machine, and they, again, make it do what they need to do in their application.
Understood. I wrote a book, Ghost wrote a book for a gentleman who was in the tobacco industry.
Okay.
And one of the first things I learned was that in the very beginning, it took a woman 1 hour to roll 50 cigarettes. Then the process was automated, and they could do with the machine 500 in an hour.
Sure.
No one lost their job. And I couldn't find it. And I mean, it's silly because it wouldn't have been reported, but nobody was concerned about automation taking away jobs. But fast forward a few decades ago, and when ATMs came out, everybody was screaming that would be the end of tellers at banks. There's an automatic fear of automation. And let's not even get into AI. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we've all seen those, pictures or I guess commercials of robots, welding auto bodies and assembly lines going by. And in a lot of those commercials, they don't necessarily show folks on the production floor, even though there's always lots of folks on the production floor. So I think people just have this vision, this dystopian vision that, again, robots are going to replace humans. And it's going to include their job. And I just think that's a vision that we all have. It's definitely, though, that's a misconception.
I agree. Now, what processes should be automated and what should not be automated?
Well, I would say in general, the first jobs that should be automated are those where it's difficult for humans to do it. Okay, it's repetitive, it's inefficient, it has the potential to cause injury, from, carpal tunnel syndrome and other similar type human maladies. But really any kind of job where it's difficult for a human to be, or difficult for a human to do, and it could cause injury, those ought to definitely be at the top of the list for sure. And then I would say maybe some other jobs where there requires extra precision than a human can perform. In those scenarios, maybe automation can assist a human, or even in some cases, replace a human for that particular task, even though almost always there's going to be a human that is supervising that particular task. An example I would give there would be like robotic surgery, right? Which can greatly assist a doctor, but does not replace a doctor.
What's the best process for becoming automated?
What's the best process for becoming automated? So I guess if you're talking about, which processes should I do first, I talked a little bit about, the ones that humans struggle with. That's definitely one. Another scenario I would say would be situations where you can get the quickest return on investment, right? And usually those will point you at the applications where it's difficult for a human to do it because they're doing it inefficiently, and therefore to get the job done, you need more humans than is effective, right? So I would say, you kind of start with, which ones do humans struggle to do for a variety of different reasons, and then which ones are going to give you your quickest return on investment. I would say that'd be, areas to look at, because ultimately automation is an investment that only some companies are going to be able to make.
That was a good answer, but not to the question I asked, or at least
okay, fantastic.
I thought I was asking. A company decides that they have a process that needs to be automated.
Mm-hmm. Oh, how do they get started with that? Okay, very good.
For becoming automated.
Sure. Okay, so first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to find some expertise in the field, right? Because most companies, or most entrepreneurs, if you will, who are manufacturing something, they have an expertise, right? They know how, they know what product is required. They know what price it needs to sell at. In general, they know how to build it. They have a lot of knowledge, but they aren't necessarily automation professionals. They don't necessarily know how to automate it. So the first thing they're going to need to do is really call in an expert. And typically in the automation world, those are called system integrators. And those are companies that are experts in automation. Some of them specialize in automating a specific industry, right? They may be experts in oil and gas or food and beverage or whatever the industry might be. And so they might have some industry knowledge that is useful to the company looking to do automation, or it might just be that they have the knowledge of the automation equipment that can be used to do the automation purposes, and they may lean heavily on the company they're servicing for the intellectual property that will help them, program in the expertise into the equipment so it can do what they need to do. The secret sauce might be owned by the client, the company looking to become automated, but they just don't have the expertise to apply the automation to get the job done that they need. So that's usually the first step. Find an expert, usually in the form of a system integrator, and then they can kind of lead you from there. Usually, most system integrators have equipment they're familiar with, equipment they're comfortable with, that they will recommend to a specific client that's looking to do automation. And the good ones, the really good ones, they will be open to using whatever the best equipment is to get the job done. A lot of them are familiar with one or two large brands, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in general, a really good system integrator will be open to applying the automation components that are best going to serve the application. Was that closer to your answer you're looking for?
That's what I was going for.
All right, very good.
Is automation only for manufacturing?
It's not. That's one thing that I always have fun talking to people who, like friends and others who aren't in the automation industry, because again, they've all got that, brain view of, oh, you're in automation, you therefore must work on robots. And robots are an important part of automation, don't get me wrong. But, our equipment, and just PLC equipment in general, that's the type of component we make as a PLC. Our equipment is used in all kinds of, I guess what you would say, non-industrial applications. I just spent a few days on a farm in Montana looking at some incredibly well automated farming equipment. Okay. And that's one example. Another great example is sports and entertainment. I mean, if you've ever been to Las Vegas, and, there's a lot you can pay for in Las Vegas, but one of the things that is kind of free is you can stand on the strip and you can watch the fountains at the Bellagio, or outside the Bellagio. And those are all controlled with automation, making the fountains dance and the light show and the music and all that. That's automation. And in that particular application, some of our equipment's actually used. But that's an example of automation where you really don't think of it as being automation. You just think of it as being a nifty fountain show at the Bellagio, for instance.
I'm just smiling because that was the closing scene in the Ocean's 11 movie remake.
Right.
And yes, I have been to Las Vegas. Yes, I lost money, but I lost no more than I was willing to lose.
Excellent.
So my gambling bank account was not broken.
Excellent.
I was tempted. I didn't do it.
Good.
And one guard came over because the security there is not automated.
Sure.
And one guard came over and he said, I was watching you on the camera and I couldn't decide whether or not you're going to bet anymore or not. And I said, I didn't know either. So
exactly. And one thing to keep in mind, just because there is a human involved, and there's plenty of humans involved in that security application you're talking about, there's still plenty of automation. Those cameras, they're synchronized to, to move and to cover areas and all that sort of thing. So there's a fair amount of automation even in that.
And that's why nobody can rob a Las Vegas casino.
Except in the movies.
Except in the movies, where it should be.
That's right. Exactly. Some other fun applications. I'll tell you about another one. A lot of folks are sports fans, and there's a lot of automation in sporting venues. So we have a customer that is an expert in thermodynamics and on, elaborate water heating systems. And they they basically automated, designed, and installed the hot water system in an NFL stadium. And think of that application for a minute. So you've got a system which isn't even used for like 350 days a year. Mm-hmm. And then for the football games or the concerts, the 12 or 15 dates a year where they're used, you got 50 or 60,000 people that need hot water, and they don't need it all the time. They mainly need it at intermission and at halftime. So, that's a lot of hot water that needs to be controlled tightly and needs to be available on demand with a really difficult demand schedule, if you will. So that's another example of automation, but in sports, for instance.
Never thought of that. That's very interesting.
Another one more time. Sorry, I keep saying one more, but another one related to sports, and that is, we'll stick with the NFL. Think of the broadcasts they do every week. So you have these broadcast trucks that come in, mm-hmm. filled with audio video equipment and backup generators and all that sort of thing. Well, that equipment gets hot. It needs temperature control. So you got to keep it cool so it doesn't overheat. And if you do have a power outage at the site, you got to just in an instant, you need to switch over to backup power. So again, even more automation for the football game.
What about, now you got me thinking of sporting events. What about, mm-hmm. I'm sure it's the same for all sports today, but at baseball parks, mm-hmm. there's a camera that runs around the top of the cable that's holding the screen that took forever to have enough brains to put up so that people wouldn't be hit by line drives. But that's right. A good story. Mm-hmm. Are those automated, those cameras?
From what I know, yeah, they are. Now, my understanding is, at least the cameras I'm familiar with that sound like what you're talking about, is they'll go in before they'll go in before the date of the particular event, the game, what have you, and they'll string those up to the far reaches of the stadium, like one in each corner, near the top of the stadium. And then, they'll take measurements and they'll do some calibration. And then, then it's effectively programmed almost like a drone that they can control with a joystick to move it wherever they need to move it. And they've pre-programmed it so that it won't hit certain limits, and run into things and cause problems. So that's my understanding. But yeah, that's a different type of automation. But yeah, that's automated.
And what about, and this has always fascinated me, the ability of the person operating the camera to follow a golf ball in flight?
Now that, good question. I'm guessing, while I'm sure there's some automation potentially involved, I'm guessing that's just some highly skilled camera people with a lot of experience and knowing what they're doing. So that may not be quite as much automation going on with that sort of camera work as there would be with one of those drone cameras or those stadium cameras, the sky cams as they call them.
So humans are still smarter than machines in some respects.
Sure, exactly. Now, and even again, even on a sky cam, there's a human that's moving the joysticks, right? So you can say, yeah, it's automated, but to a certain extent, it's automated to assist a human to do things he couldn't do on his own.
I have a problem that friends know that, and viewers for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but I can never remember the names of the books or the. Whoever wrote this, I would love to be able to give you credit. I can't.
Okay.
I remember reading that one bank had a 3-month process for approving mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to cut that down to 3 days,
Mm-hmm.
which just revolutionized that part of the bank.
Sure.
Are there non-mechanical processes that can be automated?
Sure. A process doesn't necessarily have to be mechanical in order to be automated. It's just when we think of automation, we think of machines, and when we think of machines, we think of mechanical machines, just because that's human nature. That's what we think about. But yeah, certainly, you can have applications which are, automated per se, where there's no mechanics involved. That's just not what we traditionally think about in automation. But, you talked about getting that mortgage approval process down to what, 3 days? I'm now, of course, with the digitization of everything, I think there's places that will actually, get you approved while you're on the phone if you stay on the phone long enough.
Yeah. Which brings me to my next question. The apps on our phones,
Mm-hmm.
would you call that automation? When you go onto the phone to do something?
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly can be. It certainly can be. Sometimes they're tools for automation. I think most of the time they're tools for automation. For instance, it's not that uncommon these days for customers who work with automation on a daily basis who want to be able to interact with their equipment remotely, right? From their phone, for instance. So let me give you an example. So I'm a micro brewer, right? I've got a small brewery. Maybe it's attached to a restaurant that I own, and I'm going to be doing brewing from time to time. And I have equipment on even in my tiny little operation that's just good for, one microbrewery or one restaurant. I have equipment that's assisting me in doing the brewing for me, right? And part of that brewing is going to involve, making adjustments, doing some things in person, but some of it may be just kind of getting the equipment started before I leave the house in the morning, right? And so they want to be able to, from their phone, they want to be able to accomplish that. So different companies, and we're no different, have applications or apps that run on their phones that allow them to interact with the automation equipment that's at their facility. So they get up in the morning, they have their coffee, they pull up, the equipment that's back at the microbrewery. They either check in on a batch that's already going, or they get something started before they leave the house, and I would call that not necessarily automation by the app itself, but I would call the app itself a powerful tool to be used in automation.
Good example. So you've got your brewery,
Mm-hmm.
you're making beer,
Mm-hmm.
It's in a vat,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a flame underneath to warm the brew. Correct?
As far as I know, yes. I'm not an
Yeah.
expert on brewing. I just know that
Okay.
I have customers that are brewers that are using it.
Okay. So you go to your app in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
you turn it on,
Mm-hmm.
and something goes kaplooey.
Mm-hmm.
And before the thing is going to blow up and
Mm-hmm.
take your garage with it, the app turns off the fire.
Okay.
So there's no longer any danger. And you get a notice on your phone saying what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And you can continue doing your full-time job, not having to worry that your house just burned down.
There you go. But more than likely, the thing that stopped the fire from happening,
That's what I was going to ask.
the auto shut off, more than likely that was actually back at your facility,
Sure.
because you don't want to depend on a cellular
No.
signal or
That
a
was going to be
wireless
my
signal to stop
question.
a fire.
That was exactly going to be my question.
Yeah.
The automation is the
Mhm.
switch that shuts everything off. It's not the app.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That would be a much safer way of designing a system like that than, being purely dependent on an app. I mean, for instance, Wi-Fi as an example, wireless networks are everywhere, both in industry as well as in our personal lives. However, if you're going to be using any kind of wireless network, no matter how normally robust and working all the time, you do have to have fail safes in case something, in case that network, you have to have fail safes even with a wired network, especially you need them with a wireless network, for instance.
There is a checklist in 2 industries that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
The first is aviation.
Mm-hmm.
Pilots must go down a checklist before they are allowed to start their plane.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors, surgeons have to go down a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
In other less serious medical situations, there's
Mm-hmm.
also somewhat of a checklist, which may just be, even though you just told them and they know it's you, you have to repeat your name and your date of birth just to be on the safe side that they're sticking the needle in the right person.
Sure.
Now, for pilots, it's so that the flight will be safe.
Mm-hmm.
For surgeons, it's so that they don't make a mistake and start operating on the wrong person or the
Mm-hmm.
wrong body part, which of
Mm-hmm.
course has happened. Thus the
Mm-hmm.
checklists. What's the safety checklist for automation?
Okay, well, it really depends on the industry, frankly. So it's not universal. It all depends on the level of danger, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all about regulation, right? So what type of product are you producing? If you're producing a prescription drug, of course, there's a whole series of regulations that you are going to be subject to. Again, it all depends on the industry and what the requirements are. Then there's also OSHA requirements too, in some cases, right? Occupational safety requirements. So it really is very dependent on the industry. And also, safety is one of the really important reasons that you should, as a company looking to perform automation in your plant, it's a reason why you should consult with experts, because they're going to have a history with not only designing automation that is effective, but also that is safe. So yeah, so it's not universal. It really depends on the industry. It's partially dependent on regulation. But then there's also some best practices and some specific safety equipment that experts in the automation industry will be familiar with.
Now I'm going to ask you an unfair question.
Sure.
How much of your process is automated?
Oh, not as much as it should be. That it's not an unfair question. It's kind of ironic, really. Now, I will say this. For instance, we make our products are electronics effectively at their core. And so all the electronics manufacturing is automatic, right? So the circuit boards, putting the chips on the circuit boards, soldering the circuit boards, all that is automatic. Okay. So that part of the process is fully automatic. But our final assembly process is not fully automatic. We have human beings that are doing the final assembly of the components that go along with the printed circuit board. And primarily that's for one reason, and that is because we are not making, we all think of things like, components like televisions and computers and things like that. The volumes of those products is in the millions and millions and millions. The products that companies like us manufacture, might be 10,000 a year, or maybe 100,000 a year, or maybe even a couple hundred a year, depending on how specialized it is. So part of the decision, automate or not automate, is also about volume. Do you have the volume to justify the tooling and the investment to do automation? So again, all of our electronics are automated, but our final assembly is not.
I was not bored, but when you start talking about soldering, maybe somebody may have noticed that I looked at my finger, because many, many years ago, you know what I'm going to say, I was soldering something and the iron hit my finger. And I had for years a scar. But I forget.
Yeah, we do some robotic soldering.
Yeah.
We do. I mean, there's different types of soldering that's done. You have what they call surface mount components, which just sit on the surface of a circuit board. And then you have through hole components, which go through a hole in the, a lead on the part will go through a hole in the circuit board. And, both of those, for the most part, are automated. Both our surface mount soldering as well as our through hole soldering. But the through hole soldering requires a robotic soldering machine. We call it a KISS machine. And it's pretty cool to watch. There's a solder pot that has this bubble of solder, and that robotic solder pot goes from location to location to solder the specific joints that need to be soldered, moving around all the components that it has to avoid so that, that they don't get hot and fall off the board, for instance. So that's pretty cool too, watching that machine work.
Now today, stealing from the Japanese, on any assembly line, somebody can pull the plug and stop things if there's danger, or even if they think that something can be done better. So even your automation line is not totally without human influence.
Oh, of course. It's a human that loads the part on the machine. It's a human that looks at the results of the job and takes the part off the machine and puts the next one on there. And then we have another human. We have some automated inspection, that's done by X-ray equipment for certain types of chips where you can't see everything. And then we also have some inspection that's done by a human being who's, a person who has 20 years of experience and can do touch up and inspection manually to catch things that are difficult to catch with a computer.
Chuck, I have an automated process.
Okay.
Which, when I look at my clock and I see that we're almost at the half-hour mark, I know that we have had a good show. And I thank you profusely. I have one final question for you.
Sure.
Is there anything that I did not ask that you wish I had asked? And if I had asked, what would you have said?
Oh, good question. I thought the one thing I really like about your podcasts is that you ask great questions.
Thank you.
And that you are not always asking the question that the interviewee is expecting to hear, which is fun. That makes it a lot more of an interactive process. So no, I enjoyed the conversation. I can't think of anything specifically I wish you would have asked me. So therefore, I'm not going to tell you what I would have said.
All righty. Well, I thank you for the compliment. I thank you profusely for coming on. And obviously, this is your contact information, and I'm sure viewers will reach out. So
excellent. Thanks, Bruce.
My pleasure. And perhaps this part should have been a little bit more automated on my part, but
I can help you with that.
that's all right. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.